Hello, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story. So let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Part 1. Hiding. Lucas Kane woke up before dawn when the sky over Haven Pines was still tinged with the pale gray of fog. At 35, he was no longer the man who once struck fear into the entire underworld, a notorious kingpin, second to none but above all, with an iron fist, who had orchestrated multi-million-dollar deals amid the smoke of gunpowder and cold, piercing gazes. Now he was merely a silent figure in an old wooden cabin perched precariously on the edge of Pine Hollow Lake, a remote spot in the small town of Haven Pines, Oregon. The cabin had nothing remarkable about it: weathered wooden walls, a mossy-stained tiled roof, and a small porch overlooking the calm water. But to Lucas, it was everything: a place to escape, to forget the years of blood and fire that had stained his life black. He stepped onto the porch in worn-out boots, a tattered flannel jacket hanging loosely over his shoulders. The scruffy beard he kept wasn't just to ward off Oregon's chill, it was a mask, concealing the face that once made enemies cower in terror. Lucas lived discreetly, almost invisibly. He only left the house in the early morning, while the town still slept, to fish from a small wooden boat or visit the general store for essentials: bread, milk, and sometimes a cheap bottle of whiskey to soothe the long, sleepless nights. He spoke to no one, didn't smile, didn't let anyone remember him. To the people of Haven Pines, he was just the guy by the lake, a stranger no one bothered to question. Haven Pines was a small, peaceful town, like something out of an old postcard. Dirt roads were blanketed with dry pine needles fallen from towering trees. The gentle lapping of the lake against the shore sounded like a soothing lullaby, and the air carried the faint scent of burning wood from the fireplaces of quaint little homes. The townsfolk lived slowly, friendly but not overly curious, a quality Lucas valued more than anything. They held gatherings in the town square on weekends where children ran around and adults chatted about crops or the weather. Lucas never went. He preferred the darkness of his wooden cabin to the light of unfamiliar smiles. But that morning, as Lucas sat on the rickety armchair on the porch, holding a mug of thick black coffee, an unexpected detail shattered his stillness. A black car, not a delivery truck or a familiar local vehicle, glided past the narrow path leading to the lake. It moved slowly, almost deliberately, its headlights sweeping across the water before disappearing behind the pine trees. Lucas frowned, his hand instinctively tightening around the dagger hidden in his jacket pocket, a habit from his days of living in danger. His heart beat a little faster, though his mind tried to calm it. "Just a trick of the mind," he muttered to himself, his voice hoarse from disuse, but his eyes stayed fixed on the road where the car had vanished. He stood up, stepped inside, and shut the wooden door with a sharp click. The interior was sparse to the point of austerity: a single bed pushed against the wall, a small scratched wooden table, and a shelf with a few cheap novels he'd picked up from a secondhand store. No TV, no radio, nothing to connect him to the outside world. Lucas wanted it that way, a place to sever all ties to his past. But that black car, fleeting as it was, planted a seed of doubt in his chest. Had they found him? The old enemies who had sworn to make him pay with his blood? He sat at the table, his hand trembling slightly as he poured more coffee. He didn't want to think about it, but memories flooded back like an unstoppable tide. He recalled the long nights in the underground bunker in Chicago, where he ran a transnational smuggling network. He remembered the sound of gunfire, the sharp sting of gunpowder, and the eyes of traitors he'd once called brothers. He remembered the last time he nearly died, a bullet through his chest, leaving a long scar as a reminder that he'd never truly escape. After that night, Lucas had left it all behind: the money, the power, the reputation. He disappeared and fled to Haven Pines, hoping to live as an ordinary man. He stood again, walking to the sink to calm his mind by washing the old mug. Through the small window, he saw the lake shimmering under the first light of morning. A lone duck glided silently across, leaving faint ripples. The sight usually steadied him, but today, it couldn't erase the unease. Lucas wondered if he was truly safe, or if he was just living in a fragile illusion. At noon, he decided to go fishing on the lake, a routine that kept his mind sharp. He put on his jacket, pulled his cap low over half his face, and stepped onto the small wooden boat tied to the shore. The cold wind blew through, carrying the damp scent of earth and pine. Lucas cast his line, eyes fixed on the water, but his thoughts drifted to the past. He remembered his last meeting with Vincent, his right-hand man, who had warned, "If you leave, they won't forgive you. They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." Lucas had smirked, thinking he was clever enough to vanish completely. But now that black car made him doubt himself. As the sun rose higher, Lucas reeled in his line, catching only a small fish that he released back into the lake. He didn't need the fish. He just needed a reason to get out, to prove he still controlled this life. On his way back, he passed the trail into town, where small wooden houses began to light up. A few locals waved from afar, but Lucas only nodded, not stopping. He didn't want them to remember his face, didn't want anyone entering his world. Back at the cabin, he set the fishing rod in the corner, shed his jacket, and stepped into the small bathroom. Standing before the cloudy mirror, he unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the long scar running down his chest, a deep, jagged mark, proof of the years he'd lived beyond the law. He touched it, feeling the rough skin under his fingertips. That night, he'd lost everything: blood, trust, and a part of himself. But he'd survived, and he vowed not to let the past drag him back. Lucas put his shirt back on and stepped onto the porch as dusk began to fall. The lake now glowed a brilliant orange, reflecting the dark pine ridges. He sat down, a cold beer in hand, staring into the distance. The black car might have been a random passerby, but his instincts, the ones that had saved him countless times, told him it wasn't a coincidence. He took a sip, the bitterness sliding down his throat like a warning. "They won't find me," he told himself, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. But deep down, he knew peace was never permanent, not for someone like him. Part 2. A Fateful Encounter. Rain began to fall as Lucas Kane stepped out of the wooden cabin by Pine Hollow Lake. Small droplets slipped through the pine canopy, tapping a steady rhythm on the brim of the cap he pulled low over his face. He hadn't planned to go far today, just a short trip to the general store to buy more coffee and a few loaves of bread. But as the rain grew heavier and the cold wind cut through his thin flannel jacket, Lucas decided to seek shelter. He scanned the pine needle-covered dirt road of Haven Pines, his gaze settling on a small wooden sign hanging in front of the Pine Brew coffee shop, the only nearby place still lit up. Lucas pushed the door open, the faint jingle of a bell announcing his arrival. Inside, the warmth stood in stark contrast to the chill outside. The aroma of roasted coffee filled his nostrils, mingling with the scent of burning wood from a small fireplace in the corner. Round wooden tables were neatly arranged, a few paintings of lake scenes hung on the walls, and a modest bookshelf brimmed with old novels. Behind the counter, a young woman was wiping glasses. Sophia Miller, 28, the owner of this coffee shop. She had naturally tousled brown hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck, sparkling blue eyes like the lake at dawn, and a warm smile that could melt anyone, even someone like Lucas. Sophia looked up, her smile widening when she saw him. "Hiding from the rain?" she asked, her voice gentle but radiant. Lucas nodded without replying, pulling his cap lower to shield his wary eyes. He chose a table near the window, sat down and stared out at the rain pelting the glass. He didn't want to talk, didn't want to be noticed, just needed a quiet corner until the storm passed. But Sophia, with her cheerful and curious nature, wasn't about to let him fade into the shadows so easily. She walked over, setting a mug of warm water in front of him without asking. "Consider it a welcome gift for a new customer," she said, winking. Lucas glanced at the water, then at her, replying in a hoarse voice, "I don't drink water." Sophia laughed, unfazed. "Then let me make you a coffee on the house. Rain like this without something warm in your hands is just too dreary." Lucas started to refuse, but before he could get the words out, a loud crash echoed from the corner of the shop. Three drunken men, their jackets soaked through, were causing a ruckus at a table near the fireplace. One knocked over a chair, the wood clattering to the floor with a thud, while another guffawed, waving a beer bottle around. Sophia frowned, stepping forward with a calm but firm voice. "Gentlemen, please sit down or leave. I don't want trouble here." But the group didn't listen. The tallest one, his face flushed red from alcohol, grabbed Sophia's arm, slurring, "Why so serious? Get us more beer." Lucas clenched his fists under the table, his eyes narrowing. He didn't want to get involved. He'd sworn to steer clear of trouble, to live invisibly. But as Sophia yanked her arm free and the man advanced closer, he couldn't stay seated. He rose, approaching with a slow, powerful stride, like a predator restraining its strength. "Let her go," he said, his voice low but icy. The drunks turned, ready to mock him, but Lucas's piercing gaze made them falter. The tall one snorted, lunging with a clumsy punch. Lucas sidestepped swiftly, then locked the man's neck with his left arm, slamming him onto the table with just enough force to subdue him without making a scene. The other two moved to jump in, but he fixed them with a stare, his voice steady. "Get out! Now!" The calm authority in his demeanor, paired with his discreet strength, sent all three stumbling to their feet, muttering curses as they staggered out. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving the coffee shop in silence. Sophia stood there, eyes wide, a mix of surprise and gratitude on her face. She brushed her hair back, regaining her composure. Thank you. I didn't expect you to be that strong." Lucas didn't reply, heading back to his table, intent on leaving immediately. But Sophia hurried over, placing a hand on the counter to block his path. "Wait, at least let me treat you to a coffee, okay? I owe you." Lucas shook his head, his voice gruff. "No need." But she wouldn't relent. "Then at least tell me your name. I'm Sophia, the owner here." He hesitated, his eyes tracing her radiant face. "Lucas," he said curtly, then pulled his cap down and stepped out into the rain before she could say more. Sophia watched him disappear into the downpour, her gaze full of questions. "Lucas," she murmured as if the name were a puzzle to solve. The man who just saved her wasn't just strong. He carried a mystery that she couldn't stop thinking about. He lived alone by the lake, spoke little, yet his actions said more than words ever could. A few days later, they crossed paths again by chance. Sophia was struggling with a jammed glass door outside the shop, gripping a screwdriver but unable to budge it. The rain had stopped, but the cold wind still tousled her hair. Lucas passed by, returning from the general store with a paper bag of bread and coffee. He meant to ignore her, but when he saw her nearly drop the screwdriver, he paused. "Need help?" he asked, his tone flat, as if he didn't care much either way. Sophia looked up, her face lighting up when she recognized him. "Lucas! Oh, perfect timing. This door's been stuck for a week. I'm totally stumped." He set his bag down, took the screwdriver from her without a word, and with a few quick, precise movements, he removed the hinge, adjusted the frame, and reattached it as if nothing had happened. Sophia watched, hands on hips, her eyes sparkling with interest. "You're a real silent hero, huh? Living alone by the lake with skills like that. I bet you're more than just a fisherman." Lucas handed back the screwdriver, shrugging. "It's nothing." He turned to leave, but Sophia piped up. "Hold on. Let me treat you to coffee again. This time, no excuses." She pulled out a chair, practically forcing him to sit. Lucas sighed but relented, if only to stop her persistence. Sophia brewed a black coffee, setting it before him with a beaming smile. "Now we're even. You've saved me twice already." They sat there in the shop's cozy warmth. Sophia began talking about Pine Brew, the coffee shop she'd opened 3 years ago, hoping to create a warm spot for the town. "I love seeing people smile, hearing their stories. One day, old Mrs. Mary told me about her missing cat. Another day, Mr. Tom bragged about his new grandkid. It's small stuff, but it makes me happy." Lucas listened, saying little, nodding occasionally, but his eyes, though he tried to hide it, softened as she spoke. There was something about Sophia, her sincerity, her warmth, that felt foreign to him, like a ray of light piercing the dark corners of his heart. When the coffee was gone, Lucas stood. "Thanks," he said, his voice carrying a hint of warmth for the first time. Sophia tilted her head, studying him. "Who are you, so strong yet living alone by the lake?" she asked, echoing her question from their first meeting. Lucas paused, his gaze flickering. Just someone who likes quiet, he replied, stepping out before she could hold him back. Sophia watched him go, still holding his empty mug. This man, Lucas, was unlike anyone she'd met in Haven Pines. He appeared like a gust of wind, helped her, then vanished, leaving her with a curiosity she couldn't shake. She resolved to learn more about him, not just out of gratitude, but for something she couldn't yet name. Part 3. Days of Closeness. One early autumn morning, as pale golden sunlight filtered through the pine canopy and spilled onto the dirt road of Haven Pines, Sophia Miller stood in front of Pine Brew Coffee Shop, hands on her hips, staring intently at the wall behind the counter. The wooden surface had faded, marred by stains from days of leaking rain, and she decided it was time for an upgrade. She wanted to repaint the wall and add a small bookshelf in the reading corner so customers could sip coffee while relaxing with a novel. But Sophia knew she couldn't do it alone. She was clumsy with anything requiring strength, and a screwdriver had already proven to be her greatest challenge. Lucas Kane passed by the shop on his way back from the lake, carrying a fishing rod and a small bag of fish he'd just caught. He intended to walk straight past without glancing sideways, but Sophia spotted him from afar. "Lucas!" she called out, her voice as radiant as the morning sun. He stopped, turned around and frowned as she waved enthusiastically. "I need some help here. Are you free?" Lucas sighed, his eyes flickering with reluctance. "Help with what?" he asked, his tone flat, as if eager to end the conversation quickly. Sophia grinned broadly, pulling him toward the wall. "I want to repaint this spot and build a little bookshelf too. You're so handy. Last time you fixed the glass door in no time. Help me out, and I'll pay you with free coffee for a month." Lucas looked at her, then at the wall, his hand unconsciously tightening around the fishing rod. He didn't want to get too involved. The closer he got to someone, the easier it was for them to ask questions about him. But Sophia's sparkling eyes and the sincerity in her every word made it impossible to refuse outright. "1 week," he replied curtly. "No more." Sophia clapped her hands, bouncing like a child. "Fantastic. Let's start today, okay?" That afternoon, Lucas showed up at Pine Brew with an old toolbox and a few cans of paint Sophia had bought from the town store. He wore a rolled-up shirt, his cap pulled low as usual, and began working without much talk. Sophia bustled around him, helping and chatting away. "What color do you like?" "I picked a light green, but if you prefer something else, just say so." Lucas shrugged. "Any color's fine," and kept brushing paint onto the wall in neat, even strokes. His silence didn't deter Sophia. She started talking about the shop, her regular customers, and the first time she brewed coffee so badly, it filled the house with a burnt smell. Lucas didn't reply, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward, a rare smile he didn't notice. Then an unexpected moment broke the rhythm. While Lucas stood on a ladder painting the upper section, he accidentally tipped over a small can of paint. A splash of light green landed squarely on Sophia's white shirt. She yelped, half surprised, half amused, staring as the stain spread. Lucas turned, eyes widening, looking flustered for the first time. "Sorry," he said quickly, stepping down to grab a rag for her. But Sophia burst into laughter, grabbed a paintbrush, still wet with color, and swiped a long streak across his cheek before he could react. "Now we're even," she declared, laughing so hard tears rolled down her face. Lucas stood there, paint on his face, staring at her with a mix of surprise and confusion. Then he chuckled, a hoarse, brief sound, but enough to crack the cold shell he always wore. "You're trouble," he muttered, wiping the paint off with his hand. Sophia shrugged. "But it's fun, right?" They resumed working, but the air felt lighter now, as if that splash of paint had erased part of the invisible barrier between them. Over the next few days, Lucas came to the shop more often. He finished the wall, then started on the bookshelf, a task requiring precision that he handled with remarkable skill. Sophia stayed close, assisting and talking. She told him about the books she loved, from Jane Austen's romantic novels to Jack London's adventure tales. "Do you read?" she asked, handing him a wooden plank. Lucas nodded. "Yeah, when I was a kid." He didn't elaborate, but his eyes dimmed slightly as he recalled his childhood. Those rare, peaceful days before life shoved him into darkness. Sophia didn't press him, but she shared more about herself. She spoke of her dream to open Pine Brew, how she'd left the city for a quieter place. "I wanted this to be somewhere people feel at home. Some days, Mrs. Mary sits here all day just reading the paper. Other days, kids run in begging for cookies. It's small, but it's enough for me." Lucas listened, hammering nails into the shelf with steady hands. He said nothing, but inside her warmth felt like a strange breeze stirring the cold, locked corners of his heart he'd shut away for years. One late afternoon, as the bookshelf neared completion, Sophia invited Lucas for a walk by Pine Hollow Lake. "You've worked all day. Take a break. I'll show you the best view in Haven Pines." Lucas meant to decline, but she grabbed his arm and pulled him out before he could protest. They walked along the shore, the water gleaming under the sunset, pine needles rustling beneath their feet. Sophia pointed into the distance, where a flock of ducks glided silently. "Beautiful, isn't it? I love sitting here every evening, just listening to the waves." Lucas followed her gaze, nodding. "Quiet," he said, his voice low. They sat on a large rock by the water's edge, Sophia bringing 2 cups of coffee she'd prepared. She handed him one, her fingers brushing his as he took it. Lucas felt the warmth of her touch, and for a fleeting moment, he wanted to hold her hand. But he pulled back quickly, gripping the cup to stifle the urge. Sophia didn't notice, or pretended not to, continuing to talk about the afternoons she'd spent dreaming there. "As a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, fly to Mars. But now I just want to be here, with the shop and this lake." Lucas watched her, his gaze softening at her smile. "My childhood didn't have dreams," he said suddenly, his voice hoarse. Sophia tilted her head, curious. "Really? Tell me." He hesitated, then spoke briefly. "My family was poor. My dad died early. I had to work young. No time to think about Mars." He stopped, unwilling to delve into the years that followed, when he'd stepped into the underworld to survive. Sophia smiled gently. "And yet here you are, quieter than my dreams. Funny how that works." Their lakeside walks became a routine. They met after closing the shop, strolling by the water, talking about simple things, how strong or mild to brew coffee, which books were worth reading, or how Mr. Tom in town had just gotten a new dog. Their bond grew through subtle moments. Lucas's eyes gentled whenever Sophia laughed, his hand brushed hers when passing a cup, and he found himself standing a bit closer to shield her from the cold wind. Sophia sensed the shift but didn't push him to say it. She quietly savored their closeness. Yet Lucas always maintained an invisible line. Whenever Sophia probed deeper, "How long have you lived by the lake?" Or, "Where's your family?" He answered briefly, then changed the subject. He feared that if she knew the truth, that he'd once been a crime lord, that his hands had been stained with blood, that old enemies might be hunting him, she'd turn and run. He didn't want to ruin these peaceful days, didn't want her warm eyes to look at him with fear or distance. One evening as they sat by the lake, Sophia suddenly took his hand. "Lucas, I don't know much about you, but I like being around you. You don't have to tell me everything. I just want you to know that." Lucas stared at her small hand in his, a strange feeling rising, warm yet painful. He wanted to speak, to open up, but memories of the past, gunshots, blood, the scar on his chest, kept him silent. He squeezed her hand lightly, then let go, standing up. "It's late. Let's head back," he said, his voice hoarse. "Are you still following the stories from Soul Stories?" Share your thoughts and feelings about today's story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more meaningful and heartfelt stories from Soul Stories. Part 4. Unexpected Moment. The Kiss in the Nook. That evening, Haven Pines was shrouded in a thick fog, draping the small town in a cold gray cloak. Pine Brew coffee shop had closed, its faint golden light spilling weakly onto the pine needle-covered dirt road. Sophia Miller stood behind the counter, reviewing the day's ledger, while Lucas Kane helped her clean up, as had become his habit in recent days. He gathered chairs into the corner, swept the floor with steady motions, his strong hands working instinctively, as if it were the only way to keep his mind from drifting to dark memories. Outside the counter, Jake, The new employee Sophia had hired to help on weekends was wiping down the last table before heading home. At 19, Jake was tall and lanky, with tousled blonde hair, still awkward but eager. Sophia glanced at him, smiling faintly. "You did great, Jake. Be on time tomorrow, okay?" Jake nodded. "Yes, Miss Sophia. I'm heading out." He grabbed his jacket and was about to leave when the shop door suddenly swung open, the sharp jingle of the bell cutting through the quiet. Two unfamiliar men stepped inside, their menacing presence unmistakable. The taller one wore a black leather jacket, his eyes sharp and cold as a blade, hands in his pockets but clearly gripping something. The shorter one, bald, scanned the room with restless eyes. They didn't resemble Haven Pines locals, no trace of the friendliness or ease of regular customers. Jake froze near the door, startled, while Sophia looked up from her ledger, her smile fading. Lucas, sweeping in the corner, stopped, his eyes narrowing as he recognized them instantly. Henchmen from his old organization, sent to probe, to confirm if Lucas Kane was truly hiding here. The tall one approached Jake, his voice low and gravelly. "Shop's closed, huh?" "No problem. Just got a quick question." He tilted his head, eyeing the employee with scrutiny. "You work here, so you must know the townsfolk, right? Any tall, quiet guy hanging around lately?" Jake hesitated, clutching the rag tightly, his voice shaky. I just started last week, don't know much. You could ask Miss Sophia, the owner." The bald one smirked, turning to his partner. "The owner? Let's ask her then." Lucas, hidden behind the newly built bookshelf, gripped the broom handle tighter, his heart racing. He knew if they spotted him, everything would unravel. Not just his identity exposed, but his connection to Sophia would draw their attention too. He couldn't let her get tangled up, couldn't let her become a target for those who'd sworn to make him pay. His eyes darted around the shop, landing on a small nook behind the counter. A storage space for old tools, just big enough for two, concealed by a wooden curtain Sophia used to hide odds and ends. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice low but firm, signaling her to come closer. She was stepping out from behind the counter, about to address the men, but Lucas's piercing gaze stopped her cold. Before she could process what was happening, he moved swiftly, grabbing her hand and pulling her back behind the counter. He slid the wooden curtain aside, ushering them both into the cramped nook, then closed it with a quick, quiet motion. Inside, the space was pitch black, reeking of old wood and machine oil. Sophia pressed against him, her shoulder touching his chest, her breath quickening in surprise. "Lucas, what?" she started, her voice trembling, but he pressed a finger to her lips, whispering, "Quiet, they can't see us." Outside, the two men advanced deeper into the shop. The tall one called out, his voice booming, "Where's the owner?" "Sophia, come out, we've got questions." He turned to Jake, still frozen near the door. "You said she's here. Where'd she go?" Jake stammered. She was just behind the counter. Maybe she stepped out." The bald one snorted, moving closer to the counter, his eyes skimming over the wooden curtain, but not lingering. "Sophia, anyone in here?" he shouted, his tone threatening. No response came, only a heavy silence blanketing the shop. Inside the nook, Lucas stood in front of Sophia, his hands on her shoulders to keep her still, his eyes locked on the men through a tiny slit in the curtain. He could feel her heart pounding beneath her thin shirt, her breath warm against his neck in the tight space. She trembled slightly but stayed silent, her gaze fixed on him, full of questions and fear. Lucas held her hand tighter, a silent reassurance, though he was tense too. If they checked behind the counter, there'd be no escape. The tall one waited a few seconds, then grunted. "Guess we got it wrong. No one's here." The bald one nodded, muttering, "If that guy's around, he'll show up eventually. Let's go." They turned, their heavy footsteps fading toward the door. Through the slit, Lucas watched their shadows disappear into the fog, the door slamming shut, leaving behind a weighty stillness. He exhaled but held his position, waiting a moment longer to ensure they wouldn't return. Still pressed against him in the nook, Sophia looked up at him in the dim light. Her face was mere inches from his, her warm breath brushing his lips. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice soft but resolute. "Who were they?" Her eyes glimmered with a mix of worry and curiosity, her lips parting slightly as she spoke. The closeness was overwhelming, the confined space bringing their mouths nearly touching, and in that instant, Lucas felt a powerful surge of emotion. Not fear, not tension, but something he'd suppressed for days. He didn't answer, just gazed into her eyes, his own softening, losing their usual chill. Then, as if drawn by an irresistible pull, Lucas leaned down, pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle yet intense, a smoldering flame igniting after their days together. His lips were warm, meeting hers with a tenderness laced with longing, as if pouring out everything he couldn't say. Sophia froze for a second, stunned, then closed her eyes, kissing him back, her hands instinctively clutching his shirt. Their breaths mingled, hearts beating in sync during that brief blazing moment. When they parted, still in the nook, their faces flushed, breaths ragged. Sophia touched her lips, her voice shaky. "Lucas." She didn't know what to say, her heart racing wildly. Lucas looked at her, his eyes flickering with unease but honesty. "I don't know," he whispered, his voice rough. "I just wanted to." He shifted back slightly, but the tight space kept him close, closer than ever. Sophia smiled faintly, her own emotions a tangled mess. "So you don't hate me, right?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. Lucas didn't reply immediately, just watched her for a long moment, then slowly pushed the curtain aside. The shop's golden light spilled in, illuminating their shy expressions. "Let's get out," he said, his voice low. "They're gone." He stepped out first, pulling her along, his hands still holding hers, though he didn't realize it. Back in the shop, Sophia brushed her hair back, trying to steady herself. "Lucas, who were those guys? Why'd you hide from them?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. Lucas turned away, his fist clenching as he fought his feelings. "I don't want you mixed up in this," he replied, his voice hoarse. "Lock up. I'm going." He headed to the door, but before leaving, he glanced back, a rare warmth in his eyes. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, then stepped out, leaving Sophia standing there, her hand on her lips, a smile she couldn't hide. Lucas walked back to his cabin, hands in pockets, his mind awash with emotions he couldn't name. That kiss wasn't to silence her. It was because he couldn't resist her closeness, something he never thought he'd allow himself to feel. He knew those men would return, but now he faced a greater danger, his own heart. The part ended with him by the lake, moonlight casting a conflicted glow on his face, while Sophia locked the shop, her heart brimming with a new, undeniable sensation. Part 5. Facing the Past. The morning after the kiss in the nook, Haven Pines awoke to a chilly autumn day, the sky a dull gray, as if foreshadowing something ominous. Lucas Kane stood by Pine Hollow Lake, holding a mug of cold coffee, his eyes gazing distantly at the still water. He had barely slept the night before, his mind reeling with images of the two strangers in the coffee shop and the sensation of Sophia's lips on his. He knew they were enforcers from his old organization, sent to probe, and if they returned, he couldn't keep running forever. But what unsettled him most was Sophia. She had entered his life, and now he couldn't let her be dragged into the darkness he'd tried so hard to bury. At Pine Brew, Sophia opened the shop as usual, but her heart was no longer at peace. She wiped the counter, brewed coffee, and chatted with regulars, but her eyes kept darting to the door, torn between hope and worry that Lucas would appear. The kiss last night wasn't just a fleeting impulse. It had awakened something deep within her, a bond she couldn't deny. Yet it came with questions. Who were those men? Why did Lucas hide from them? And why did his eyes hold such anxiety when he left? Lucas arrived at the shop around midday, when the crowd had thinned. He stepped inside, his cap pulled low over half his face, his demeanor as guarded as ever. Sophia saw him, a smile flickering across her lips, but she quickly sensed he wasn't there to work as usual. He stood behind the counter, keeping some distance, his voice low. "We need to talk." Sophia nodded, signaling Jake, the new employee, to mind the shop, then led Lucas to a quiet corner near the bookshelf where they could speak privately. "Lucas, what's going on?" she asked, her gaze steady but gentle. "Those guys yesterday, Who were they? Why are you afraid of them? Lucas looked at her, his hands clenching in his pockets, wrestling fiercely with himself. He wanted to keep her far from the truth, but after what had happened, he knew she deserved to hear part of it. He took a deep breath, his voice rough. I used to live in a dangerous world. People like them, they're from a past I left behind, but it seems it's not letting go of me that easily. Sophia froze, her eyes widening as she tried to process his words. A dangerous world? What do you mean? What did you do? Lucas turned his face away, his eyes heavy with burden. I did things no one would be proud of. I wasn't a good man, Sophia. Those guys, they could come back anytime, and if they find out I'm here, they won't stop. He paused, unwilling to delve into the details. The years in the underworld, the blood-soaked deals, the enemies he'd faced. But he needed her to grasp the gravity of it. Sophia stayed silent for a moment, her hands gripping the table's edge to steady herself. Then she stepped forward, placing her hand on his, her voice trembling but firm. I don't know everything about you, Lucas, but I believe you're not a bad person. If you were once like that, you've changed. I see it every day you're here. She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with a resolve that caught him off guard and touched him deeply. I'm not afraid. I want to be with you, no matter what happens. Lucas stared at her, a mix of emotions swelling within. Warmth from her trust, but also worry because he knew she didn't fully understand what she was facing. You don't know what you're saying, he whispered, his voice hoarse. If they find me, you'll be in danger. But Sophia shook her head, refusing to let go of his hand. I'm not running away, Lucas. We'll face it together. Her determination, though naive, left him unable to argue, and deep down, he knew he didn't want to push her away. They devised a plan to avoid attention. Lucas decided to cut back on his appearances at the shop. He'd only come during quiet hours or after closing, steering clear of being seen there too often. Sophia agreed to keep things normal. She'd open the shop, chat with customers, and guide Jake as if nothing were amiss. They hoped that if the men returned, they'd see it as just a small, ordinary coffee shop with no ties to Lucas. But both knew it was only a temporary fix. His past wouldn't let go so easily. The following days passed in a quiet tension. Lucas came to the shop late at night, helping Sophia clean up, but he remained vigilant, his eyes frequently flicking to the door. Sophia tried to keep the mood light. She told him about regulars, about Jake spilling a tray of pastries, and sometimes they'd laugh together, though Lucas's smiles always carried a hint of weight. They didn't mention the kiss, but their closeness simmered beneath the surface, shown in accidental brushes of hands or silent glances they exchanged. Then one night, as Sophia locked the shop after her shift, a stranger appeared. He didn't enter, just stood under a street lamp a few yards away, his figure hazy in the fog. Sophia couldn't make out his face, but when she turned back to check the door, she noticed a small slip of paper wedged in the crack. Her hand shook as she picked it up and read, Kane, you can't hide forever. I know you're here. No signature, just scrawled handwriting and a chilling threat that sent a shiver down her spine. Sophia raced to Lucas's cabin at once, heedless of the late hour or thick fog. She pounded on the wooden door, her voice urgent. Lucas, open up! Something's happened. Lucas opened it, his eyes darkening instantly at the panic on her face. She thrust the note at him, breathless. I found this at the shop. Lucas, do they really know you're here? Lucas took the paper, his hand clenching it until it crumpled. He recognized the familiar scrawl, not from the two men before, but from someone higher up in the old organization. They weren't just probing anymore. They were certain. Lucas, tell me, Sophia grabbed his hand, her voice resolute despite trembling. What do they want from you? Lucas met her gaze, his eyes heavy, then finally spoke. They want me back, or dead. I was part of them, Sophia, a big part. When I left, I betrayed them, and they don't forgive that. He stopped, unwilling to let her know more about the killings, the bloody nights, but she'd heard enough to sense the danger. Sophia fell silent, but instead of pulling away, she stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. I don't care who you used to be, she whispered, her voice choked. I only care about you now. We'll get through this together. Lucas stood still, feeling the warmth of her embrace, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Yet alongside that came a gnawing worry. He didn't want her hurt because of him. They sat at the small wooden table in his cabin, planning their next move. Lucas resolved to contact an old friend in the organization, not to return, but to negotiate a way out. Sophia suggested calling the police, but Lucas shook his head. The police can't help. This is my mess. I have to fix it. She disagreed, but eventually relented, as long as he promised not to face it alone. I'll be here, she said, gripping his hand tighter. Wherever you go, I'll be here. Part 6. The Final Decision. After the night he received the threatening note, Lucas Kane knew that running was no longer an option. He stood in the wooden cabin by Pine Hollow Lake, the dim glow of an oil lamp casting light on a face filled with resolve, but also weighed down by worry. The slip of paper bearing the words, "Kane, you can't hide forever," lay on the table, a challenge he couldn't ignore. He'd been on the run too long, and now with Sophia by his side, he couldn't let his past continue to threaten the life he was trying to build. It was time to end all grudges, even if it cost him his own life. Lucas sat down, his hand trembling slightly as he pulled out an old prepaid phone, the last relic from his days in the underworld. He dialed Vince, once his trusted right-hand man, now a figure the organization's boss relied on to hunt down traitors like him. It was Vince who'd sent the two men to Pine Brew the night before, and Lucas knew only he had the authority to stop this. The phone rang in the silence, each tone like a knife stabbing into his chest. Finally, Vince's raspy voice answered, "Kane? You're still alive and daring to call me?" Lucas didn't beat around the bush, his voice low but firm. "I want to meet. One last time. Haven Pines, east edge of the forest. Tomorrow. Just you and me." Vince gave a mocking laugh, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You think I'm dumb enough to come alone? The boss wants your head, Kane. The two guys we sent to that coffee shop already suspect something." Lucas gripped the phone tighter, his eyes cold. "If you don't come, I'll go straight to the boss myself. You know what I'm capable of. One last time, Vince. I want to end this." Vince fell silent, then finally agreed. "Fine, but you're a dead man if you try anything." The call ended, leaving Lucas in a heavy stillness. He knew it was a gamble, but he had to try, for Sophia, for himself. The next morning, Lucas left early, not telling Sophia about the meeting. He didn't want her to worry, didn't want her stepping into danger with him. He wore his old flannel jacket, a dagger tucked in his pocket, not for attack, but for defense. On his way to the eastern forest edge of Haven Pines, he passed Pine Brew, his gaze lingering on the small wooden sign he'd once helped Sophia repaint. He told himself, "If I make it through today, I'll come back to her." But he also braced for the worst. The meeting took place in a sparse pine forest where fog still clung to the tall trees. Lucas stood waiting, hands in pockets, his gaze sharp as it had been in his kingpin days. Footsteps echoed from afar, and Vince emerged. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, clad in a worn leather jacket, his seasoned eyes scanning like a wolf's. He hadn't come alone as promised. Down the slope, a few hundred yards away, Lucas glimpsed the silhouettes of several henchmen waiting, guns at the ready. Vince had a fallback plan, but Lucas wasn't surprised. He knew the treachery of this world too well. "You've got guts, Kane," Vince said, his voice rough with a hint of mockery. "Calling me out here after betraying the boss. The two we sent to that coffee shop said there's a guy who looks like you there. You're good at hiding, but you've run out of road." Lucas stepped closer, keeping a safe distance, his voice steady. "I'm done with you all. I'm not going back, not threatening anyone. Leave Haven Pines alone. I just want to live quietly, Vince. That's it." Vince smirked, shaking his head. "You think it's that simple? The boss doesn't forgive traitors. Rules are rules. Come back or die. I don't want your blood on my hands, but I've got no choice." He reached for his waist, where a gun peeked from under his jacket, his eyes wavering as if weighing his options. Lucas stood still, his gaze unflinching. "You shoot me, Vince. You won't stay safe with the boss either. You know who I was. If I fight back, None of those guys down there will make it out. But I don't want blood anymore. I just want you to let me go." The tension between them was taut as a wire. Vince's hand tightened around the gun. His eyes conflicted. He'd once respected Lucas, seen him as a brother, but loyalty to the organization held him back from letting go easily. Lucas locked eyes with him, his voice dropping low. "You owe me one, Vince. That time I saved you in Chicago, you remember? I'm not asking for much. Just tell the boss I'm dead. Let me live, like a normal person." Vince went quiet, his gaze flickering between memory and the present. Then suddenly he drew his gun, raised it skyward, and fired a single shot. The blast echoed through the forest, startling birds into flight. Lucas didn't flinch, his eyes fixed on Vince. Below the ridge, the henchmen stirred, but Vince raised a hand to silence them. He lowered the gun, looking at Lucas with a complicated expression. "To me, you're dead from now on, Kane," he said, his voice rough. "I'll tell the boss I shot you, but if they find out you're still alive, don't blame me for not warning you." Lucas nodded, a trace of relief in his eyes. "Thanks, Vince," he said, his voice low. Vince didn't reply, just turned and walked into the fog, his figure fading among the pines. The sound of the henchman's footsteps receded down the hill, leaving Lucas alone in the quiet forest. He exhaled, the weight in his chest slowly lifting. He wasn't sure Vince would keep his word forever, but for now he'd won his freedom, not with blood, but with a fragile deal. As the sun climbed higher, Lucas returned to Haven Pines, weary but unburdened. He stepped into Pine Brew just as Sophia was clearing tables after the midday rush. She looked up, saw him, and her radiant smile quickly turned to concern when she noticed his tense, dirt-streaked face from the forest. "Lucas, where were you all morning?" she asked urgently, dropping the tray and rushing toward him. He didn't answer right away, gesturing her to the quiet corner by the bookshelf. Facing her, he took a deep breath, his voice low. "I met someone from the old organization. He's the one who sent those guys to the shop. I told him I'm done, I'm not going back, and he agreed to let me go." Sophia's eyes widened, her hands clutching his shirt. "Met them? Lucas, are you crazy? What if they'd shot you?" Her voice trembled with worry, but Lucas placed his hands on her shoulders, his gaze softer than ever. "I'm fine," he said, his voice rough. "He fired a shot into the air, told me I'm dead to them now. He'll tell the boss I'm gone. I'm exhausted, Sophia, but I'm relieved. I wanted to end this, for you." Sophia stared at him, her blue eyes glistening with tears, then suddenly threw her arms around him, holding tight as if afraid he'd vanish. "Whoever you used to be, I only need the Lucas I have now," she whispered, her voice choked. "Don't scare me like that again. You hear me?" Lucas stood still for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her, feeling her warmth seep into him. For the first time in years, he felt truly free, not just because of Vince, but because of her, the one who gave him a reason to keep going. They sat at a small table in the shop, hands still clasped. Sophia rested her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "I was so scared, Lucas, but I don't want to lose you." Lucas squeezed her hand, looking out the window where Haven Pines remained peaceful as ever. "You won't lose me," he said, his voice steadier than it had ever been. "I ended it today. From now on, I want to build a future. With you, no more shadows." They dreamed together of the days ahead. Lucas would stay in Haven Pines living as an ordinary man, and Sophia decided to expand the coffee shop, not just for business, but to make it a place that bound them forever. They laughed together, the burden lifting from their shoulders for the first time, though both knew his past could resurface if Vince's word faltered. But now they had each other, and that was enough to face anything. Part 7. A New Happiness. After the confrontation with Vince, Lucas Kane and Sophia Miller embarked on a new chapter of their lives in Haven Pines. The pressure of the past slowly faded, though Lucas still occasionally startled at odd noises in the night. But with Sophia's steadfast presence and the tranquility of the small town, he resolved not to let fear rule him anymore. Together, they renovated Pine Brew Coffee Shop, transforming it into a warmer place, not just for business, but to build a home for a future they soon discovered would include a new member. Lucas spent weeks crafting outdoor wooden tables, placing them along the shore of Pine Hollow Lake, where customers could sit and watch the water shimmer. Sophia came up with the idea for a small bookshelf corner, but now she added a children's play area too, complete with wooden toy boxes and little drawing boards. They repainted the shop's walls a soft blue, hanging up landscape drawings by the town's children, a community bonding initiative. Not long after Pine Brew was finished, Sophia found out she was pregnant. When she told Lucas, he stood motionless, his eyes flickering between shock and joy. "A child?" he asked, his voice rough. Sophia nodded, beaming, and for the first time, Lucas hugged her tightly, as if afraid it were only a dream. The baby, a little girl named Lily, was born the following spring. With her mother's tousled brown hair and her father's deep blue eyes, Lily quickly became the center of their world. Lucas and Sophia embraced a simple life with her. Each morning, Lucas brewed coffee in the cabin's tiny kitchen, while Sophia carried Lily to the porch, singing lullabies as the lake lay shrouded in mist. They talked about small things, from cookie recipes for the shop to Lily learning to clap her hands. At night, they sat on the cabin porch, gazing at twinkling stars, Lily sleeping peacefully in Sophia's arms. And Lucas felt his heart swell with a joy he'd never known. Haven Pines gradually accepted Lucas as part of the community. Once the mysterious guy by the lake, he became a devoted father everyone adored. He fixed Mrs. Mary's roof, hauled firewood for Mr. Tom, and sometimes brought Lily along, letting her giggle with the town's kids. Sophia was the biggest bridge. She told everyone Lucas was a good man, and no one pried into his past. Stories about him became a buried secret, replaced by the image of a small family living quietly by the lake. 2 years after Lily's birth, on a spring morning, Lucas sat on the porch with the local newspaper, a rare read for him. He flipped through the pages absent-mindedly until a headline caught his eye. "Police bust major Chicago smuggling ring. Dozens arrested." It was his old organization, the network he'd served and betrayed. The article reported that the big boss and many lieutenants had been caught, based on years of gathered evidence. There was no mention of Vince, but Lucas knew he was cunning enough to have escaped or stayed silent in jail about his death. He folded the paper, his hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from relief. His past was truly over. Sophia stepped out, holding Lily, and saw him sitting still with the paper. "Lucas, what's wrong?" she asked. He looked up, offering a rare smile, and pulled her to sit beside him. "They're done, Sophia," he said, his voice hoarse. "My old crew, the police took them down. We're really free." Sophia hugged him, Lily giggling between them, and from that day, Lucas walked lighter, a father and husband no longer haunted by his past. Years passed, and Lucas Kane and Sophia Miller, now gray-haired, remained as in love and at peace as ever. They still lived in the wooden cabin by Pine Hollow Lake, now expanded with a wider porch and a small garden bursting with vegetables they'd tended alongside Lily, their daughter now grown. Pine Brew had become a Haven Pines icon, not just a coffee shop, but a piece of the town's memory, where generations gathered and found warmth amid Oregon's cold days. Lucas, now over 60, retained his tall frame but moved more slowly. He enjoyed sitting on the porch's wooden chair, carving toys or reading, while Sophia, nearing 60, kept her radiant smile despite deepening wrinkles around her eyes. They no longer worked at Pine Brew daily. Lily, now 25, had taken over after earning a business degree. She modernized it with new coffee machines and a broader menu, yet preserved the bookshelf corner and lakeside tables her parents had created. Lucas and Sophia watched their daughter with pride, seeing in her a blend of his resilience and her mother's warmth. 2 years after the smuggling ring's collapse, their lives had fully shed the shadows. Lucas had shared his past with Lily when she was old enough to understand, not to boast, but to show her the value of the peace they had. She listened without fear, holding his hand and saying, "I'm proud you changed, Dad." Sophia sat beside them, smiling, and from then on they lived as a family unburdened by what once was. In their final years, they embraced a simple life by the lake. Mornings, Lucas picked vegetables, tomatoes, lettuce, and mint. Sophia loved in her tea, while she brewed for them both. They sat on the wooden chairs, watching the lake glisten, talking about Lily, her boyfriend she'd brought home, or the grandchildren they hoped for someday. Afternoons they read together. Lucas still favored adventure novels. Sophia stuck with Jane Austen. Sometimes Lily visited, bringing pastries from the shop, and the three laughed and talked until dusk. The story closed on an autumn sunset, the sun staining Pine Hollow Lake red. Lucas and Sophia sat on their chairs, hands entwined, gazing outward. Lucas, his hair white, his eyes still bright when he looked at her. Sophia leaned on his shoulder, her smile soft as the day's last light. Lily stood in the distance, watching her parents from the porch, a warm smile on her face. "Did you ever think we'd have a family like this?" Sophia asked quietly. Lucas squeezed her hand, his voice rough. "No. But I'm glad we did." They fell silent, savoring the moment. A life healed and fulfilled, built from love, forgiveness, and Lily's laughter. The lake sparkled under the sunset, reflecting the elderly couple and their daughter's silhouette. Pine Brew glowed in the distance, a testament to the years they'd lived fully. And Haven Pines remained peaceful, embracing their little family, forever. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.